A black man in his early 50s sits on the edge of his unmade bed at 1:13 a.m., staring down at a pile of unopened envelopes on his floor while rubbing his temples in absolute silence. Most people who pass by his window would look at that quiet room and assume he's just enjoying some late-night peace after a hard day. I'm Marcus, and I'm here to tell you that this silent picture isn't a sanctuary. It's a quiet breakdown, and the roots of this heavy exhaustion go much deeper than a bad workday, a dry dating market, or any conversation society is currently having about single black men. You probably know him. He's your uncle who's always the first to show up when someone needs a hand, but never asks for help himself. He's that quiet, reliable guy at work who gets the job done, nods with a tired smile, and politely declines the Friday drinks. Your cousin who comes to the family dinner, tells a quick joke to keep everyone happy, leaves by 8 o'clock, and is back sitting in his dark, parked car in the driveway by 8:30, staring at the steering wheel in absolute silence, because walking into that quiet house feels like lifting a mountain. We look at his incredibly quiet life, and we call it simple. We assume that because he doesn't have the loud arguments of a complicated relationship, the chaotic noise of kids running through the hallways, or the daily drama of a messy household, that he's somehow bypassed the heavy friction of adulthood. But we are confusing a lack of noise with a lack of pain. There is a massive gulf between a life of quiet peace and the paralyzing exhaust fumes of survival mode isolation. What society mistakes for a peaceful choice is actually just the silent surrender of a man who is completely worn out from carrying a lifetime of heavy stones with nobody to share the load. The harsh reality is, many single black men crossing into their 50s aren't enjoying some quiet retreat. They are surviving inside a self-built fortress. They've spent 30 years pouring their energy into everyone else's cup, holding up family trees, grinding through unforgiving jobs, and saving everyone else from drowning, only to look down and realize their own well is bone dry. So, instead of pleading for a voice in spaces that only see them as a blank check or a safety net, they quietly drew the curtains. It's not a rejection of human connection. It's simply that they are completely exhausted from performing a character whose only value is what he can produce, provide, or endure. And this is the exact moment where the mental bruising becomes permanent. When a black Gen X man finally accepts the bitter truth that he is only loved on the condition of what he can do for people, something inside him simply snaps shut. He stops reaching out. He stops checking in on people who never check on him. He quietly stops showing up to family events where he's only expected to be the strong, silent anchor, and he begins to evaporate from his own social circle. This isn't anger, and it isn't laziness. It is a desperate mental shield, a survival instinct of a man choosing to disappear rather than be drained to zero. And the most heartbreaking part of this quiet retreat is that it is brutally effective. The shield they built to keep the pain away slowly solidifies into an unbreakable cage. When you stop picking up the phone, the world quickly forgets your number. When you stop showing up, the invites dry up in a matter of weeks. In the beginning, this cold quiet feels like a massive relief, a chance to finally breathe. But as the months and years bleed together, that relief rots into a heavy, suffocating confinement. They realize far too late that the boundary they drew to keep the users out has become an impenetrable wall that keeps absolutely everyone out. And the most tragic realization is that once you are locked inside this fortress, breaking out feels like clawing through concrete. After half a century of being the rock everyone leaned on, admitting to the world, or even to yourself, that you are starving for a single human connection feels like total defeat. So, instead of trying to tear down the walls, they simply learn to polish the bars of their cage. They buy the massive 80-inch TV. They spend hours detailing the car in the driveway every single weekend, and they repeat the quiet lie that this empty, heavy silence is the peace they worked their whole lives to find. And the most devastating part of this epidemic is how crowded these quiet ruins actually are. We aren't talking about one isolated case. There is an entire generation of black Gen X men living in identical, silent fortresses on the exact same streets. They brush past each other in the supermarket aisles. They exchange that empty, brief nod at the gas station, both of them suffocating under the exact same weight, and both of them starving to be recognized as human. Yet, Both are so completely drained by the daily struggle of survival that the simple act of breaking the ice feels like starting a war. Because if you keep waiting for someone else to knock on your door, you'll be sitting in that silence for the rest of your life. The walls you built for safety are now the ones sealing your fate. Tonight, don't just watch the screen. Look at the silence around you. It isn't your enemy. It's just a mirror. And it's time you finally started looking back. And that's the final, silent horror of this existence. You aren't just invisible to the world. You are slowly becoming a ghost in your own life. You realize that you've spent so much energy keeping the peace that you never actually left a mark. You didn't build a legacy. You built a vacuum. And the terrifying realization hits that if you were to simply vanish tomorrow, the silence you've cultivated would be the only thing left to tell your story. You have been waiting for a sign, a permission slip, or some massive crisis to finally force you out of this hole. But here is the brutal truth. The disaster you are waiting for isn't coming, because you are currently living inside of it. This change you are holding your breath for isn't a bolt of lightning. It is the terrifying, singular choice to stop pretending that your survival is someone else's burden. You have to be the one to shatter your own silence, because the walls you built were never meant to be a home. You aren't going to fix this tonight, and you definitely won't fix it with a single thought. Tomorrow morning, when the house is still quiet and the weight hits your chest exactly the same way, you'll have the same choice. You can go back to polishing the bars of your own cage, or you can step through the door you've been ignoring for a decade. The lock is off. You're the only one still sitting inside.